Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think we're ready to get started here. We appreciate you joining us for this webinar on the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act. We're so delighted to have joining us Congressman Blake Moore. I'm Derek Miller. I'm the president and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber. And as many of you know, the Chamber is an advocacy organization. We provide these member briefings to help keep you informed on important issues to the business community. And as I mentioned, today's briefing focuses on the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act of 2024, which recently passed the U.S. House of Representatives and is now moving to the U.S. Senate. We will hear a lot about this bill from Congressman Moore. I would simply like to say that we're grateful for his work and the work of our other members of our Utah delegation in the House of Representatives as they've passed this bill, which is going to help with financial security for working families, help to boost growth and American competitiveness, as well as strengthen communities and other Main Street businesses. I think it's important to note that this bill also includes the Small Business Growth Act, with which Congressman Moore is the sponsor of. This bill allows small businesses to purchase essential equipment by increasing the cap on tax deductions for business investments under Section 179. We're looking forward to hearing more from Congressman Moore in just a moment about the other details of this bill, what it's about, and what it means for our business community. And then after his presentation, we'll have a brief discussion with some Q&A. We appreciate those who provided some questions in advance. I want to note that the webinar is also being recorded and will be made available on the Chamber's website afterwards. Congressman Moore, thank you again for joining us, and we will turn the time to you.
Thank you. Give me a quick thumbs up. You can hear me okay, Derek? Okay, awesome. We are sharing some slides, so I appreciate you kind of following along. But two things on the outset. One, this is the work I want to be doing. Whenever you get a chance to, I don't know, oftentimes when you go and do all your education and you end up getting to actually work in the field you chose and because you wanted to and all those things, those are like moments in life that not everybody gets. And so it's important for me as I go through the muck and the mire of politics, and especially congressional politics, and especially House of Representatives congressional politics. These are the moments that absolutely invigorate me and get me really excited about what we can accomplish, because this is the real work. Paul Ryan I was texting back and forth with Paul Ryan after this bill had passed, and he said, "Hey, that's the way to legislate. You all should do it more often." And spoken like a true former member of the House of Representatives and former speaker, it's a lot easier on the outside looking in. But it was just that moment. I was like, this is what our job is. This is what we need to be doing. And it's really, really exciting. The second thing is we've done our job in the House. Put whatever pressure you can on any senator that you know. Call our two senators. Any connections that you have at all. This needs to pass. This cannot get bogged down in the politics of the day. Leader Schumer has already indicated support of this. He even spoke about it on the House floor. The White House has indicated that they would sign this. Republicans on committee have been positive towards this. And I just don't want one of the worst things about the tough part about the House of Representatives is that it's a collective body. It's a team sport. And you operate in majorities, right? And the thing about the Senate is it's so individualistic. And I fear that this could get bogged down in a lot of the individualism that gets created in the Senate. And that scenario, these two bodies, although they have to pass the same exact bill, they operate in very different manner. There was 357 yes votes on this bill. A handful of Republicans, a handful of Democrats made their own claims. Well, it does too much with the child tax credit. And then Democrats, it doesn't do enough with the child tax credit. And we have worked to get, I think, one of the strongest and a very conservative bill. And it's basically patterned after what took place in 2017 with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So just those two quick things on the outset. I love being able to work in this environment. So thank you for all the support that the Chamber gives me. Sincerely, like to be able to do this. I have a friend, I coach Little League with him. he brought this R&D tax credit up to me 7 months ago. I was like, hey, I know, like, you know, we just getting to know each other. He's like, I don't mean to overstep, but I'm telling you, I own a small business, approximately $3 to $3.5 million in revenue. We invest, you know, $250,000 in R&D that we usually are able to write off and use as a, you know, expense that. And as of 2021, that has moved to a 5-year amortization. So what he used to be able to write off, use that revenue, extra revenue, to be able to grow his business and hire a new individual and this and that, you know, invest in some advertising, things like that. That is no longer. And it is really, really concerning. And that's hitting a small business. This hits large businesses, it's hit small businesses, and as something we've got to be willing to fix. So hopeful it passes the Senate. Got to put the pressure on it and not let all the other drama of Washington get in the way. But the bill is very, very simple, and I'll just kind of give you the highlights of it, and then would love to take some questions, Derek. 3 main provisions. 1, research and development expensing. 2, interest deductibility. And 1, 100% expensing, or otherwise known as bonus depreciation. So from the dawn of time, I think it's about the 50s, and I'm sure my team is on this call like, no, Blake, it's 1962. Well, sorry, guys, let me get close. But since for years and years and decades, you've been able to invest in R&D, US-based R&D, and you've been able to expense that 100% in the first year. Well, ever since the Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed in 2018, they had to switch that. And again, this is where Republicans doing this. They had to switch that from first year to amortize it over 5. And that was going to kick in 2021. Now, I think a lot of the folks that decided that this was a good way to cover some of the cost of that larger bill in 2017, like, hey, this, you know, we'll fix this before 2021. Well, welcome to Washington. Things don't get fixed that easily when you have split government. And there wasn't motivation over the last few years to fix it. There is the motivation now. But in 2021, it moved to a 5-year amortization, so you could expense like 20% every year. And that hit a lot of cash flow. And it strapped a lot of different types of companies, again, from small to large, that are investing in R&D. I've got companies that is like their main entire, some companies do a little R&D, some companies like that's 90% of what they do. And so they've structured themselves that way. And to change in 2021 was catastrophic for many different types of companies. So what this bill does is it retroactively initiates that same expense in the first year rule. It retroactively covers it from 2021 through the end of 2025. And that's basically the common thread for all these 3 provisions. Interest deductibility, so it's no longer, you know, it used to be you could write off your full EBITDA, but now the depreciation and amortization piece is kind of cut off from there, and you're not able to expense the entire piece of it. Well, we're going to reinstate that back to when that expired a few years ago and carry that forward through to 2025. And the 100% expensing, bonus depreciation actually doesn't just amortize over 5 years, it actually drops off. So it's 80, then it's 60, then it's 40. And we need to keep people investing in their companies. We need to create that market that is a strong growth market. So all 3 of these provisions viewed as very pro-growth tax policy, and just the investment in this will have significant yield about what that means for the overall economy. A lot of numbers are given. Our chairman likes to use approximately $600 billion of economic activity for what is being scored around the $30 billion range. Every score gets a CBO score. And before I go any further, this entire bill is paid for. So it's actually revenue neutral. 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act was not revenue neutral. It did grow our revenue, and it was actually a very strong economic pro-growth package. I would have voted for it if I was around then. But even that bill wasn't neutral, revenue neutral. This bill is, because we are removing the employee retention tax credit. Happy to talk more about that if we want to get to that. But those are the 3 main things, is those 3 key business provisions. The next slide will quickly highlight the Small Business Growth Act. Again, there are 3 things that were added in addition to those 3 major R&D and bonus depreciation pieces. Of those 3 things, one of them is our bill. So this is significant. This is one of those awesome moments. There was a ton of stuff that went into our June package, and the Small Business Growth Act survived. And That's kind of a cool moment when you go to the Ways and Means lunch and the chairman lays out, okay, here's my negotiations with Senator Wyden on the Democrat side. Here's where we're at. And, we're going to be able to keep in, he listed off 3 things, and one of them was our bill. So this is for small businesses. Before 2017, you were able to write off, you're able to expense up to $500,000 of capital expenditure. Well, in 2017, Republicans moved that to just to $1 million, and our bill will increase that to $1.29 million that you can write off for small businesses. And the coolest part about this bill is that it's permanent. So this isn't even subject to expire at the end of 2025. It's permanent. And it kind of talks a little bit about that. But this is the Section 179, very popular thing. And we're lifting that deduction cap to $1.29 million. And this, again, gives relief to those that need it the most, small businesses. At a time where we're going to move away from the COVID era ERTC or ERC, also known as, because we've got to move past some of those COVID era policies, and happy to discuss that more if folks have questions. But this is a neat thing. Big win. So moving on to a couple of the other things that are in this, in addition to the Small Business Growth Act that got added since the 50s. Again, a lot happened in tax in the 1950s, apparently, for me. But, you have subcontract labor and you'd have to do a 1099 for $600. Well, that has never changed. Even though the dollar of $600 value to today's $600 value is vastly different, as we all understand. Well, Congress has never even changed it. We learned about this and the importance of it when we went out and did field hearings for Ways and Means. Anyway, we're moving it up to 1,000. We wanted to go much higher, which is as much as we can get. And we think it's, doing 1099s for that small of expenditure is kind of a waste, and it's a burden on the system. But we got Democrats to agree to bumping it up just a little bit more. Disaster tax relief for communities affected by recent events. This is, a Florida rep did this because of the hurricane, but that will be applicable to many different areas and giving people certain tax relief in areas that they desperately need it. And then the housing piece was made very clear to the chairman and leadership of the committee that we need to include this. This is the moment to do it. These are good, strong bipartisan provisions of tax credit allocations and dealing with the housing. It's not an area of expertise that I'm on, but I am co-sponsoring, or I'm actually leading a bill that is going to do something very similar to LIHTC in our military base areas. So for particularly Hill Air Force Base, which is so important to the 1st District, we've got lots of that type of stuff going on. So let's go to just the last piece real quick. And this is, again, like I mentioned, the ERTC. A lot of good that's been brought out of this, and it brought us out of some tough COVID years, and it's just been widely used, and there's been fraud and abuse of this particular program. It ended up, regardless of if it was fraudulent or this and that, it ended up being far more expensive than it was designed to be, and we had full agreement from Republicans and Democrats that this is a good way. We end this immediately as of like a week ago. So you can't add any more new claims. The claims that were in existence are still going through it, but you can't add any more new claims. Of course, if the Senate passes it, otherwise this will go on until 2025. And it's just was a very expensive aspect that still existed from COVID that we're trying to move. So we're using this as a way to cover the expenses. Again, I didn't have it on here because this is more of a chamber meeting, but the child tax credit is the other key piece of this. Child tax credit in 2017 was $1,000. Republicans doubled it to $2,000. Democrats in 2021, they vastly expanded the child tax credit, but only for a temporary time period. And it's set to go back to $1,000 at the end of next year in 2025. And Republicans and Democrats came together and said, okay, where are we going to get to? Democrats wanted a lot more here, but we said we're going to go back to doubling it to 2,000. And we will add some inflationary measures so we can up that. We can tick it up somewhat there, a few $100. And then there's the refundability piece that's going to get added in there. So this became the negotiating piece. And again, Republicans came up with the child tax credit a long time ago and doubled it in 2017. This is very similar to what they did in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And we're approaching it that way. The refundability piece is different. But this goes to actually benefit larger families, and there won't be the limitations there. So a lot of my colleagues joked with me that Utah gets another little benefit in this particular bill because of our larger families, which I told them, thank you, basically. And there was a lot of jokes about, me and large families and all my 4 boys and all that kind of stuff, but we only have to get into it. So I wanted to get through it as quickly as possible. A really nice moment in this crazy Congress for us to put together. I'm on the committee. We've been working on this for 9 months. And up until a month ago, I didn't know if it was going to have legs. And our chairman came back in and said, you guys know I've been working with Senator Wyden on this. I feel like we have a breakthrough, and this is going to happen. And we were able to pass it by a significant margin. And it's one of those nice moments that I really hope we send over to the Senate as a mandate on. This isn't a partisan bill. This is a serious piece of legislation. There's no messaging on this. Republicans and Democrats have companies in their districts that definitely need these tax provisions, and Democrats recognize that. And we did the thing we're supposed to do, and that's to legislate in a positive way for the American people. So I'm really excited about it. I could share more, but I'll hold it off for questions, Derek, and kind of turn it back over to you. Anything else in particular you wanted me to highlight before we jump in?
Thank you, Congressman. Great overview of the bill, and great kudos to you and your team for getting the Small Business Growth Act included in the bill. That's no small feat to survive negotiations. And I also wanted to underscore something you said, because I think it's so important that we're highlighting a piece of legislation that was a product of a bipartisan effort. When I worked for the U.S. House of Representatives as legal counsel for one of the committees, I was often asked the question, are things as really bad in Washington, D.C. as we see on TV? That was 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
But what I would tell people is that you usually only hear on the news the fighting that's happening, but you never hear about the bipartisan work that's going on. And so it's really important that we highlight this for our members, not just because they're interested in the tax implications, which are important and significant, but also to highlight when bipartisanship is happening. And so thank you for that. Before I get into some specific questions, I also want to mention for those who will see this that may not be aware of the focus that the congressman has on helping businesses in Utah to be successful. And in Utah, we still understand the connection between individuals and businesses. Sometimes you hear from the far right and the far left that, well, business is the bad guy. It's the one thing that they seem to be able to agree on at both far ends of the spectrum. But in Utah, our congressional delegation understands that when you're talking about businesses, what you're really talking about are people. And you're talking about people who have jobs. And when they have job, they make money. And when they make money, they're able to take care of themselves and their families. It's just as simple as that. And we haven't.
And it shouldn't have to be restated, Derek. As plainly as that sounds, what you just did, it is. Some people still need to hear it.
Well, we're grateful for your work. And the last thing I wanted to mention for those who watch this and didn't know is that before he moved to work in Congress, Congressman Moore was a great chamber member. In fact, he was the co-chair of a group of up-and-coming young professionals. So we take a lot of pride in that. I'll never forget when he came and met with me and said, I don't think I can be the co-chair anymore because I'm going to run for Congress. And I said, why on earth would you want to do that?
Should have stayed co-chair.
We are grateful for you. I think it'd be interesting, Congressman, for you to share some of the background of why this bill came to be. Not necessarily just the specifics in it, but there's always a backstory and sort of a rationale of, why now? Why was this important now from your perspective and from your colleagues' perspective?
I love that. Cut me off if I'm rambling too much. There's 2 major reasons that I'll highlight from it. One, I have a master's in public policy. I had no idea how bills were actually scored. The CBO, the budget office, Congressional Budget Office, they will score a bill. And they basically give a number to it. They've been wildly inaccurate. And I think they tend to not value pro-growth. You reduce taxes in order to gain more revenue type of mentality. And if you look at it, when you reduce taxes, you keep more companies engaged, you keep them growing faster, they actually produce more revenue. Something that, you know, we really need to grab a hold of as Americans on that concept. Making it competitive is actually better, and it actually grows our revenue. But that score, so in 2017, there was a very heavy score laid on the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Well, you're going to reduce taxes, you're going to take the corporate income tax down, you're going to double the standard deduction, you're going to double the child tax credit. All of that is a revenue loss directly to the Treasury. And so they score it as, oh, this is a very expensive bill. And there's truth to that, except if you look at the long-term implications, you will make up a significant portion of that revenue. Arguments on whether tax cuts ever immediately pay for what it is. Whenever you get a deficit, I don't care if it's from spending too much or taxing too little, that deficit's going to turn into interest. And now that's what the major problem we're dealing with. That might be a whole nother seminar, but for purposes of the 2017 tax bill, they had to lessen the burden on what that score would ultimately be, so it wasn't too high of a score. And in doing so, Republicans decided, well, let's move the R&D from a 100% expensing that first year, and let's amortize it over 5. So you can still expense that $1 million that you did in R&D, but you can only expense 200,000 of it this year, and 200,000 the next year, and 200,000 the next year. And over time, that will help us recoup some of that revenue back. Nobody liked doing that. That wasn't something they wanted to do, but they said, hey, starting in 2021, we're going to kick that into effect. And hopefully we can figure it out before then, because this will be a big hit to companies. And so it was kind of a double-edged sword. They knew they had to do something. They didn't want to do this, but they knew there were so many other good provisions in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that they had to get that done, but they had to lessen the impact of the score. And so the reason why it was so important is in 2021, it came due. And, you know, when you lose the majority in the House in 2018, when you lose the Senate in 2021, when you lose the White House in 2020, all of a sudden you're in a different environment. And Democrats are like, well, the Republicans, this was your bill. You're now complaining about the R&D tax credit. This stems from 2017. We're not going to fix this for you. And so it took for us to get back into the majority and then go and argue and fight and claw back and help Democrats recognize they actually really support this too. And they've co-sponsored this stuff too, but they weren't going to necessarily fix it for us, right? They didn't fix it in ARPA. They didn't fix it in IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. So it took us to get in there. So we had a strong negotiator in Jason Smith, worked with Senator Wyden in amazingly good faith, by the way. I'm not disparaging Democrats for not doing it, but I'm highlighting that they worked really well together, and hopefully that progresses. The other key thing that I'll talk about just as far as timing goes, by getting this package done, and hopefully we do soon, this extends everything through 2025. It also highlights the importance of provisions like this. And in 2025, we call it the Super Bowl of tax. Fitting, since yesterday was yesterday. The Super Bowl of tax will be 2025. A lot of the provisions from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act will continue to expire. And we will be going through a strong revamp of our entire tax code. Jason Smith, the chairman of Ways and Means, will lead us through this. If Republicans stay in the majority in the House, I think we'll be in a really good position for strong pro-growth tax policies that affect good business and growth there. Who knows? We could be in a totally different situation. So we're either going to be, let's say there's a Republican in the White House, the Senate flips, and Republicans stay majority in the House. You're gonna see a different tax package come out than you would if Biden remains in the White House and the Congress is split. It's going to be wild. And I'm so excited because I'm going to be on the committee to be able to address this. This is Ways and Means, and something that affects every single aspect of our economy. This will be the big year. If we do nothing and let everything expire starting in 2026, the death tax actually doubles back up. If we do nothing, don't quote me on this, even though it's being recorded, I mean, it's in the range of like a $3.5 trillion tax increase if we don't go after and figure this out. So we've got to be in the right spot to do it. And I'm looking forward to 2025. And you know, that's what I make every conversation about. I know there's all sorts of drama out there in the political world and all this, but the election this year, you know, I want to be in the strongest position to build pro-growth tax policy so we can keep having a strong GDP.
Thank you for that preview of 2025, and we'll obviously be watching that closely, and we'll rely on your expertise and the seat at the table you're going to have on all of that important work. You mentioned a couple of times the important provision about R&D expensing. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how this specifically might help Utah businesses. And, you know, you're part of your district, all of your district is along the Wasatch Front and more. But you see so many different businesses, and you told the story about your co-coach on the Little League team. What other things would you like to see happen because of the R&D expense in our state?
Think about healthcare in Utah. And to whatever extent you're paying attention, go to Research Park in University of Utah, where I represent that portion of Salt Lake County. All of those companies invest heavily in R&D. And if they do it overseas, they write this off in a 15-year time span. But when they invest in US-based R&D, they can write it off in their first year. It's a significant growth factor. So R&D, manufacturing, things related to Hill Air Force Base. Advanced manufacturing invests a lot of research and development into new technologies and things like that. And it's huge. So not only R&D, but the 100% expensing, as well as the bonus, AKA bonus depreciation. I mean, they're able to go and make that big jump. Like, hey, we need this new piece of manufacturing. We're opening up a new wing of our manufacturing plant. Boeing's coming in, and we're going to be able to operate on their wings. The F-35 sustainment and all that kind of stuff. Like, people are constantly investing in new capital to do things more efficiently, and now they can have that tax incentive to do it. So it has broad implication. Small business piece that I mentioned, it's very similar to bonus depreciation, but that's buying a new tractor, right? That's buying a new, you know, you go to a dairy farm. I don't know if you've been to a dairy farm lately, but this is robots doing everything, right? I mean, it's fascinating to be able to kind of see it firsthand. But the one other big implication that we're doing on committee, not related to this tax bill, is something called GSP, Generalized Systems Preferences. And we've got a lot of companies that are engaged in trade that are purchasing raw material, work, labor from countries outside of China. And so Cotopaxi, for example, Maloof, those are kind of companies. Black Diamond just came back to my hearing in Ways and Means and presented on how important this program is. This gives them refundability to tariffs. And so however cheap it would be to do it in China, if they do it in Philippines, if they do it in nations, Latin America, if they do it in nations that we're more friendly with and we're allied with, then we were able to help make up for that. And that's a strong national security angle, as well as just as an economic value to that. These companies embraced this program years ago. They've been a part of the team. They've been willing to move away from China and not be over reliant on them. And that expired a couple years ago. And so now there's some back stuff. So parallel to working on this tax bill, we're working on the GSP stuff. And that's actually something that I'm driving because of World Trade Center and all of the international work that we do here in Utah, which is very robust, especially for being a city in the Intermountain West. Like, it's very robust and it actually matters. So that's a whole nother side that has direct implications on the district. So look out for that terminology, GSP. Stay following what we're doing, and we're gonna try to move that along too in the next few months, and hopefully we can do it.
I'm glad that you mentioned the international business that happens in Utah. In a previous career, I used to spend a lot of time talking about this, and people are always very surprised to find out that Utah is a top 10 export state, makes up a huge part of our economy. And when I say people are surprised, I don't just mean people outside of Utah. Often people even inside of Utah are surprised to find out just how much is happening in our economy and our business community on the international front. I was always also really glad, Congressman, to hear you talk about incentivizing businesses to do things. Sometimes we see bills, laws, policies come out of Washington, D.C., and the business community scratches its head and wonders, do they know how the economy really works? And one of the things I really like about this bill is that it seems to be so well aligned with how the economy really works, specifically in putting the right incentives in place. You mentioned R&D expensing as a way to incentivize that kind of investment. Are there other parts of the bill that you would highlight that puts the right kinds of incentives in place for businesses to make good decisions and help them to grow?
Well, I look at this more internally on what we need to be doing, because what I like about this bill at this time in this moment is that we're working in a bipartisan manner to emphasize, okay, R&D, these type of taxes, they're good. These are good, positive things for our nation, and we're not dropping the revenue. The revenue's not, these aren't just tax breaks for the major wealthy. That's my biggest frustration in my partisan world. So let me put on my partisan hat here. Over and over and over again, and no one actually tells this better than John Curtis, Representative John Curtis. He says, we as Republicans can put up all the charts and the graphs and the data to show how a certain tax policy will help companies grow, help real wage growth, limit inflation, and all that kind of stuff. Democrats can stand up on the other side and say, well, this is all this is a tax break for the 1%, and for it only helps the wealthy. And it's not true. It's not even true. We doubled the child tax credit. That only helps middle and lower income. We doubled the standard deduction. That is not, every wealthy person itemizes their taxes, right? Because they have so many, that revenue is the case. And we cannot get that point across. We are using this moment to be like, look, these are important things, strong economic growth factors. We didn't want to get rid of them, but we had to, and we've had positive success going forward. So I think that in my opinion is the best aspect of it that is going to support business going forward. Other specific things like the 100% expensing, your bonus depreciation. Like, if you're willing to go buy that and upgrade your manufacturing and processing, you're buying from another company. Their company is raising revenue. They're then, paying, additional revenue back into a system. I mean, it is a positive win across the board. Just taking higher taxes from one entity will ultimately limit what we do, and we'll see stagnation in our economy. And with our debt to GDP right now, like the GDP aspect of it is still strong, and for us to have a fighting chance to be able to chip away at this debt in a long-term fashion and to get our deficits in a reductionary phase, we have got to keep a strong GDP, and it doesn't limit revenue. That's the irony. You go look at 2017, past 2017, our revenues have been strong. We haven't lost a lot. What we need to do is to figure out where we're spending so much waste. And so if I could do a quick sidebar, this year's FY24 budget that we keep having drama with because we ousted a speaker, we couldn't finish the timeline and everything. Like, it's going to spend $100 billion less than we would have otherwise spent. We're spending less this year than we did last year, and we forced that to happen with the debt ceiling negotiations. And so we're going to take non-defense discretionary and we're going to reduce it. It would have been in the $805 billion range, and we're dropping it to $704. There's ancillary spending that goes along with that, and there's a lot of frustration there, but that stuff was going to exist regardless. We're able to lower the baseline to $700 billion, all while increasing some and doing a steady clip on our defense side. So there's areas to find waste, but if we don't fix the major problems of our budget, it's not the discretionary side, the defense, the non-defense. We're finding waste there, but we've got $4.5 trillion that we're spending on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, other welfare programs, interest, student loan. Like, those are our massive debt drivers. And I love Ways and Means Committee because those are the areas that we can try to address some of that type of stuff. And hopefully we can work on our debt to GDP ratio in the coming years, because it'll be out of hand here in very shortly.
Or might already be.
And when I say out of hand, my catastrophe is when the world stops trading in the US dollar. When we stop being the reserve currency status, like that's my concern. And you can see countries, BRIC nations already chipping away at that. You have crypto that's sort of like trying to decentralize and take away the strength of the US dollar in some regards. I mean, that's the part that scares me. Yeah, I already believe we're in a bit of a debt spiral because our interest is going to be more than our defense here in the next 5 years that we're paying just to service the debt. But when we start losing reserve status is when it becomes really scary.
I'm glad that you mentioned looking at waste. It was always confusing to me when we hear the conversation in Washington, D.C. about cutting budgets, which is actually not cutting, meaning they're going down. It's just reducing the amount of growth or the percentage or the rate of growth.
Yeah.
But even when we hear that conversation, it's almost always articulated as a reduction in service. And any business owner will tell you that if $1 less spent results in $1 less service, that you're assuming a 100% efficient system. And I'm not sure that there's anyone who would claim that the federal government is operating at 100% efficiency. So we're glad that you're focusing on that opportunity to do things better. Let's turn our attention now to small businesses. It has long been said, and accurately so, that small business is the backbone of our economy. And nowhere is that more true than in Utah, where 99% of our businesses are small businesses. Help us understand some of the aspects of this bill that are specifically designed to help small businesses. I know you've mentioned a couple of them already. Are there others that you'd want to highlight?
Right. I would just reemphasize the Small Business Growth Act. That again, that moves up the cap to $1.29 million. That's the deduction cap that you can take, and that extends it over $1 million that we did a few years ago in the TCJA. So that's directly tied to just small businesses. The R&D piece, though, I think even more so than increasing that 29%, the R&D piece is key, because there's a lot of risk in investing in yourself, and that risk is born. It's a lot easier for a big, huge pharmaceutical company to take that on. It's much more risky for a smaller business to do so. And so for those of you that are engaged on this, those of you that are advising other companies, like, work with your tax professionals, find out the areas that would qualify under the R&D. Don't miss out on these opportunities. And hopefully you'll be able to find some savings and get that reinvested back into your business. So, other than that, I mean, this was a fairly defined bill. It wasn't a gargantuan piece. It's a significant win for things that have already expired. And the interest deductibility as well as bonus depreciation all directly apply. But again, bonus depreciation and my Small Business Growth Act, they're very congruent in what they mean. Writing off big capital expenditures up to 1.29 million, it's a win. So hopefully we can keep it going. Healthcare costs, though, Derek, as you know, as all of us know, healthcare costs and what that burden is on small business is probably more significant and would be a great solution to solve. As I've gotten into it, I've got my actual healthcare guru on my team. He's my healthcare policy legislative aide. But I have met with so many different types of healthcare companies, insurance providers that are trying to think outside the box. They're trying to come up with ideas on how to, build a plan that keeps costs very low, and provides coverage for folks. I don't have any specific examples right off the top of my head, but I've just been blown away at how people are being so innovative, and they cannot, if we continue to make our healthcare market just this hybrid hodgepodge of unpredictability, no transparency, and impossible to navigate, these kind of innovative ideas won't come forward. And I think that this could be some of the most important work that we do outside of a 2025 revamp of our tax code. I think getting healthcare to be mimic it more like a private sector market, like an actual marketplace where you have competition and transparency that drives down the cost. Some of these companies come up with ideas like, where can I go get an x-ray? And where is it going to be? How much is it going to cost? You should be able to know that as a consumer. You know that in every other way, even any other insurance you buy, you know that answer, right? You know that about your grocery store. You know that about your auto mechanic. You know that about everything. You just like never looked and said like, my extra, if I need to go get an x-ray, it's going to be $600 here, $2,000 over here. And folks, that happens in our healthcare market right now. And it's a mess. And so there's a lot of different ways. Civica RX is doing unique things with that. And then so the burden of healthcare is more so the focus, I think, on small business, because we will be, if healthcare costs continue to grow at the rate they grow, like that's going to price out healthcare markets out of the field. And it's going to be too tough for them to be able to deal with it, because we as a society have said, look, 401ks, health benefits, tuition reimbursement, those things are now very common in our business practice. And, they're the indicators that people vote on for, 100 best places to work in Utah, like all those things that the chamber gets involved with and everything. Like they're a part of our fabric of our business community. And all of a sudden, if healthcare goes wildly out of control and it's a key part of business, we're going to start seeing small businesses fail just because of healthcare.
Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes left, and there's a couple other areas I want to drill down on with you, Congressman. The first you've already mentioned, which is the ERTCs, or the Employee Retention Tax Credit. And you shared with us how the changes of this bill would have an impact on the businesses around the state that are doing good work. But if I've got this correct, the changes were also made in order to maybe have an impact on those businesses that are engaged in questionable practices as well. What can you tell us about that?
I wouldn't even put it on the businesses engaged in. I think there's been an opportunism out here for not the business element, but some type of maybe a consulting firm or an agency that's going out and saying, hey, you could take advantage of this, you could take advantage of this. And the program grew wildly too large. And so I hesitate. Here's some numbers though. Every legitimate claim on ERTC that has been made by January 31, 2024 will be paid. So everything that's been in the system will be paid. The IRS got so overrun back in like September of last year, they just paused everything. They're like, we're taking on way too much. We can't process these. And so we're just going to pause everything. So legitimate claims have just been sitting there. So for us to just turn off the spigot and say no more claims as of the end of January, you have got, let us finish off what we've already been doing, all the ones that are legitimate in the process, and they'll go through the process. So that's what's going to happen. As of July 31st, 2023, the IRS had initiated 252 investigations involving over $2.8 billion in potential fraud, and largely congressional leaders think that that's barely scratching the surface. So this was taken advantage of, and it actually helped a lot of companies that needed it. And when the federal government comes in with some specific mandates or this or that, or states are imposing this, this program was set up for the right reasons. It's just been overrun and it's been too far. People take advantage, and there's opportunistic aspects of this, and at some point it just had to be addressed. It's tough. There's actually been a tough part because I hate it when, you do something and it's going to cause some turmoil to some people. And this is we started got a lot of outreach from folks, handful of companies saying, hey, like we're one of the good guys and this is going to be tough for us and this and that. And, you just can't ever please everybody. This was a good opportunity to carve out several tens of billions of dollars that we could use to offset what this other really positive bill is going to create. So
I've never seen a time in my life where business has been more intertwined with international intrigue. We think about what's happening with the war in Ukraine and sanctions on Russia. We think about China exerting its influence around the world, and we could go on and on about different things happening in different parts of the world. But there are aspects of this bill that deal with that international component of business as well, and including foreign investors in companies. Tell us about that.
You might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. So give us more accuracy, Derek, if I'm wrong. But I remember being fascinated when when Russia invaded Ukraine and learning that we essentially had one brand of vodka that we were importing from Russia. I feel like there has to be more, but we have very, very limited economic integration with Russia. Sanctions don't hit the same as they will if we have to do something similar to China, because we have far more than one brand of alcohol that we're importing from China right now. A lot of our amazing good companies are still engaged in positive relationships with China business. This was, my goodness, this was all the talk 6 months ago, 9 months ago about whether China would invade Taiwan. But as the Ukraine war continues to just wreak havoc on Europe in particular, like there seems to be less talk of it. There's more talk about border issues and what in the world we do in the Ukraine sphere. But we have to be ready for what could play out in China. And I can't predict what Xi Jinping's going to do. We know that the motivation is still there to create a one China policy. Whatever that looks like to them, whether that means invasion or whether that just means, a more soft power type of approach, it's treacherous. I see programs like GSP helping us decouple from China. De-risking from China is a whole nother story, and it's very, very difficult, and it could backfire if we try to do it too fast anyway. And a lot of companies would be in a tough spot if that happened. It'd be far worse if we completely cut off ties. We have equities in China that this could be, and then of course whatever happened with Taiwan, with the chip manufacturing and things like that, it would be catastrophic for us. So I don't have solutions to this one other than keep a strong relationship with Taiwan, deter as much as we possibly can, make it very clear to China that there will be sanctions, it will be painful for them. Their economy, it's more of a paper dragon than people like to think, and they're not seeing the growth that they would want. And I hope that makes them step back and realize this could be worse if we decide to make this move. And then the other side of it is at Hill Air Force Base, and our troops and our folks there, they're shifting a lot of their focus to the South Pacific for this reason alone, and hopefully we're able to smartly use our military force to deter conflict over there.
Thank you. Congressman, I want to give you the last word, and so we'll get you out of here on this one. What happens next with this bill? What do you predict? And anything else that you'd like to share with us in closing?
Well, I see 26 attendees, 24 plus you, Derek, and you probably count for at least 40 people with your strength. I think the 26 of us can contact our senators and say, hey, we know there's a lot of drama back in Washington right now. Do not leverage this bill. Get this thing done. It will get signed. This is what America needs right now amidst all the other craziness. And so I'm hopeful. I was a little more hopeful before last week, and the the immigration bill, the immigration/Ukraine bill that, didn't get legs. That could cause some rift and animosity. And so much of Washington is built on personalities and relationships anyway, which is a good thing and a very, very bad thing too, because then people will let, good popular sound policy be leveraged for other things. And I just don't want to see that. I just want to see this one go through, clear mandate from the House, 357 members voted for it, send it over to them and get it done. Hopefully we can see that play out. That's my best guess right now. I know that the chairman is working very hard with Wyden and Crapo. So even channel your inner Idahoan. We all go there and we love that state as much, as well. Go ahead and let your Idaho senators know that this bill matters and it's important. So we need to get this thing done. So as far as last word, like this is what I love doing. I love the politics of this job. I love being, doing like real legitimate actual legislating to get something like this done. And I hope I'm in a position in 2025 to really lead out on some key tax provisions. Utah is so strong. Utah has the secret sauce to being the economic powerhouse and the philanthropic powerhouse. We mesh all of these good things together to drive forward positive growth. It's a great example for me to always pull from. We've had multiple people from Utah, from either Health and Human Services, because I'm on welfare subcommittee, to GSP, companies in Utah, leaders in Utah are always engaging on things that we're doing back in Washington and coming back there for our hearings and our testimonies and things like that. So just know that, I really do want our federal government to more mimic what we do in Utah. And there's a big chasm between those two things. But this particular bill, it actually is a sign that we can do more of it. So I appreciate you all for engaging with me and my team, and I love being in this position to be able to find some positivity in a pretty crazy political world.
Well, thank you, Congressman Moore. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your work on this bill, your insight on it, as well as your work for our entire state. I also want to thank everyone who joined us today. As a reminder, the webinar has been recorded and will be posted to the Salt Lake Chamber website. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.